Welcome to the Operatory Podcast, the podcast about burying the dinosaurs in dentistry, moving past outdated technology and procedures to find a better way. With me today, I'm very excited to have Mike Uretz, who is a nationally recognized dental software, EHR, and teledentistry expert. He's the founder of dentalsoftwareadvisor.com, software editor for Dental Product Shopper, and he's also the author of the popular ebook, The Teledentistry Survival Guide. As an industry consultant and educator, Mike has helped individual groups, DSOs, and practices properly evaluate and select dental software and EHR vendors and solutions, structure and negotiate pricing, contracts, and provide implementation oversight and vendor management. So Mike, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Brian. I'm really excited to be talking to you this morning.
Yeah, it's we've talked a couple times on the phone, basically based on the whole. We're both involved in teledentistry, and I think we're very aligned in how we feel about technology. And what's super cool when we've gotten to know each other a little bit, you understand technology not just from a dental space, but from a medical space, because you had this rich history of being on the medical side and seeing some voids in the dental space that you thought were important to address. So, could you kind of tell our audience your journey from how you got to be how you created dentalsoftwareadvisor.com and the voids that you saw in the dental space?
Oh, sure, Brian. It's been a really interesting and long journey, as we say. So basically, I've been in healthcare IT and software for, about 25 years now or so as a techie, an IT manager, a software developer. And back in the late 90s,
we're called nerds, by the way. We're called nerds.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, we're called nerds. I'm just kidding.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, and actually, there's a lot of different acronyms we can say, right? Some good, some bad for what we're talking about. But we can actually have a whole podcast just on what people call techies and their involvement and everything. So I'm glad to bring it up, near and dear to my heart. But so on the journey I had, it was really interesting because back in the late 90s, so I'm in Seattle. And I got involved with Microsoft's healthcare their effort in the late 90s. They were trying to look at the medical market and where software is going and the future of it. And so it was really interesting because I got involved as a techie on one side and as a guy that really likes to have business owners understand technology on the other side. I thought what the world needed at that point was somebody to educate the medical world to this growing software technology, next generation technology in medicine, i.e. electronic health records and all the things surrounding that. So I did that, had a lot of thought leadership. I did a lot of consulting on electronic health records and where that's going, went through all that. And then it was interesting because around 2008, 2009, I think you and I had talked, I have a lot of relatives that are involved with dentistry. And I thought, okay, the train's left the station in the medical world for the last 10 years. There's been a big evolution of technology. Where is it going in dentistry? So I looked at dentistry in the 2009, 2010 and thought, whoa, this is as backward from a software IT standpoint as medicine was in the 90s. So I thought I would do a little bit of a flip, a little bit of segue and put it on my shoulders to start speaking, start writing, start consulting on what next generation software should look like in the dental world. And really, a lot of that came from my experiences with where the medical world evolved. So it was really exciting for me to go into dentistry where there wasn't a lot of knowledge about what we should be looking for in software. And so I kind of wanted to lead the effort starting about 2010, 2011 with really the idea of getting better clinical software, getting EHRs in dentistry. So that's kind of how my journey has been. But what's really interesting for me and what's exciting is having been in both worlds, I have a passion now to try to bring the two together because after all, it's an organic healthcare system. Both sides are as important as the other. So that's where I'm at today is really trying to help bridge that connection between medical and dental.
Yeah, and you and I have discussed how I agree completely that, I don't know sort of on a macro level how much medicine and dentistry will be blending together, but certainly on a technology perspective, it makes all the sense in the world to bring this together. And we both have been working in interoperability between medicine and dentistry for a while. And I think it's an important area if you look at it from the ultimate goal, which is to improve care and make it easier to provide higher quality care that's more efficiently, merging the technology in dentistry and medicine over time makes all the sense in the world. And the barriers are really artificially placed and or else, because all of the technology is there to bring it together. It's just not being implemented. Is another way of saying it. And one of those areas.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly, Brian. Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I noticed was that whereas, when I went into dentistry, even back in 2011, 2012, I was talking to docs and practices and groups about, hey, you know what? We should connect with records with, our own specialists and general people and our own and medicine. How do we connect with records? And they're like, well, Mike, isn't that kind of a future technology? And that's something that has to be worked on. And I'm like, no. I'm going, this technology to interconnect systems and share records back and forth, that's been around for a number of years. So it's really interesting you bring that up about the technology, because we do have the technology to do it. What's holding that back really is the vendors kind of working with each other a little bit, trying to make that work. Okay, so we have the technology to share information both internally to dentistry, right, with groups, practices, and DSOs, and externally to the healthcare system in general. It's just that we really haven't implemented it yet.
Yeah, and by vendors, I want to point out, as we've discussed, the vendors don't necessarily mean the software vendors. In part, it's the organizations that oversee, particularly standard development, which leads to the ease of interoperability and the ADA, basically, which is why we've talked about it before on the podcast. But I created Dental Standards Institute. And one reason why is for this interoperability state, and there's some sort of low hanging fruit. When we're talking about creating standards which all the vendors can work together on to create, for example, a single medical history. I think it's interesting when dentists are thinking about medical history, and they think, when somebody goes to the physician, they might say things that they don't say to a dentist because they don't think it's pertinent. Well, why don't we have that information too immediately? And on the flip side, people oftentimes come to the dentist more often than the physician. So their medical history of the dental practice may be more frequently updated. And so let's share that back and forth. But then that's kind of I think more of a long-term goal, because there's lots of people that have to be on board to make that happen. But a shorter-term goal, which is something else that you and I have a large passion about, is telehealth, telemedicine, collaboration. And that's something that we've been doing with our case collaboration with an Opera DDS for over 6 years. So can you explain kind of your perspective on how physicians and dentists can work together through teledentistry to have to elevate care?
Yes, in fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because back to what we were just talking about, yes, there are standards, yes, there's the ability to share records, but that's kind of a long play, right? Because people have to get on board, different people, different vendors, different networks, right? That will happen. But what's excited me these last few months about getting so heavily involved with teledentistry is what I realize is just what you're pointing out, that because it's typically cloud-based and because of the structure of a good teledentistry solution, now we can have collaboration in the cloud. So, for example, I'm sure you've talked about the idea of asynchronous before in teledentistry, which is kind of a behind-the-scenes communication, right? You can have a general dentist, a periodontist, an oral surgeon, maybe a cardiologist, maybe somebody at a nursing home, whatever. Now we have the idea for case collaboration, right? We can technically do it today through asynchronous teledentistry, the ability to send images behind the scenes, annotate images, make comments, right? It's like the most sophisticated chat in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right. And that's kind of the magic bullet, right? Because I've been very frustrated. I got involved with interoperability in medicine, back about 2006, 2007 when it started, and was very involved with the technology. But as you pointed out, Brian, there's so many pieces to it. It's just still getting there, right? But teledentistry just kicked everything up on steroids. It solved that collaboration problem. So that's what's really exciting for me.
Well, I agree, and obviously, like I said, that was basically the second feature after after interoffice communication that we created within Opera DDS was our digital case collaboration. It was like a lot of things we've done, it was kind of too far ahead. People didn't quite understand it.
Sure.
But it is extremely powerful, and I just want to mention kind of the power of it is that if you have somebody come to your office and you refer them to a physician for let's say they have high blood pressure, you can't extract a tooth, you have no way to actually follow up to see what happened, let alone coordinate with the physician versus like having these, I call it the dance of the morons, which is phone tag, right? So like sending that out immediately, getting the response back from the physician, being able to collaborate online asynchronously, like you're talking about, which is basically just another way of like texting or Facebook messaging or having a thread in the case of cases, it pops up within like a digital prescription form that then everybody's comments and files get logged within Opera DDS. It's extremely powerful, but under leveraged because people don't know it exists. And I think the barrier of lack of knowledge of what exists today is one of the biggest barriers too. Do you see that?
Right. And actually, Brian, and actually I'm glad I brought that up because that's the reason why I went into dentistry 10 years ago. Because the thing is, like your company and other companies that are kind of on the tip of the spear a little bit ahead. The problem is, and I found this in medicine too, with any new technology, even in my whole career, right, in technology, sometimes when you're ahead of the game a little bit, the industry has to catch up, right? You have a concept, but there has to be education on why this is helpful and why you should use this. So one of the reasons I did get into dentistry as a thought leader educator is because one of my goals was to bring concepts like you're talking about to the fore, right, to have a bully pulpit to talk about this stuff, and then have people understand why it's important. When we talk about collaboration, this is really interesting and they're dear to my heart too, because as you mentioned, I consult with, groups, DSOs, practices that are looking for new software, right? And I was thinking about, for example, I have a specialty group client that has a number of locations around the country. And one of our challenges electronically is how do we communicate with our referring providers, right? With the general dentist that refer to our specialty, and how do we go back and forth, right? Well, I've been looking at software, and some kind of do it, some kind of don't. But with teledentistry now, you can kind of bridge that, and teledentistry can actually, then you can have that collaboration, right? Today in the cloud with the general dentist and the specialist. And so that personally helps solve some of the issues I've had with some of my specialty groups and DSOs and practices that are looking like, hey, how do we collaborate? But what you're pointing out though is, I think what's exciting about teledentistry is that we're discovering use cases every day, right? A year from now, we'll have more features and functionality based on what practices, groups, and DSOs find, right? They're just inventing things every day. I'm sure that you find in your own company, right? Your own clients.
That's kind of what we do, is we like the inventing piece, right? And bringing that to market. And so, on the spectrum of where people are, we're the sort of creating the tools that you can then advise people on how to implement and which ones are the best. And so obviously I'm a huge fan of what you're doing, because you're helping educate people. Because truly, if everybody had the knowledge that, as a software vendor in dentistry, I believe strongly, like my competition, like in digital case collaboration, is not other digital case collaborations. It's people doing it the old way. It's a piece of paper and printing off a crappy radiograph image and a prescription pad versus digitally collaborating. That's the real, enemy that I believe is good, right? Which is why it's the whole purpose of this podcast, to bury these dinosaurs so that we can move on. And you're kind of like the dinosaur hunter. You were hunting in a field with less dinosaurs. You looked over at dentistry and saw it was like, oh my gosh, this is like Jurassic World. Not only are there dinosaurs, but they're in cages for me to kill, right?
It's kind of interesting, because when we talk about how education helps, I see that firsthand every day with what I do in the education and thought leadership world, right, in dentistry. I remember it was probably, I'm trying to think, maybe 7 years ago or 8 years ago, I was speaking at a dental convention, right, to a bunch of docs about e-prescribing, right? Now, you have to realize I've been involved with electronic prescribing since about 2007 when it first came in. So I live and breathe. I've known that technology for years and years. So I started talking about, hey guys, so I was talking about EHRs, and dental EHRs was the lecture. But I started talking about, hey, the importance of e-prescribing, and every dentist was raising their hand saying, well, that's great for medicine. We're a general practitioner prescribes, 50 drugs, but we just prescribe 2 or 3 or 4 drugs. What do we need electronic prescribing for? We can easily do that. And I